Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I have a special guest episode for you today. I'm joined by Gemma Price, and we're going to be talking all about tension and trauma release exercises, which is known as TRE. That's what I'm going to be referring to it as throughout the episode. But this is a nervous system regulation practice, a form of somatic therapy that can help release trapped energy and emotion from the body and just regulate your nervous system so that you can handle more stress, you have more resilience, which is probably something that we're all aiming for. So Gemma Price is a holistic practitioner who works with clients who are adversely reacting to their food, their environments, themselves. They're in this hypersensitive, high histamine state, and they're wanting to calm their system down. She has a particular interest in immune health and histamine intolerance based on some personal experience and experience with her daughter. She supports her clients to understand and address underlying imbalances that could be exacerbating their reactivity so that they're able to more easily flow through life. And as a nutritional therapist and nutrigenomics practitioner, Gemma uses food, lifestyle approaches, and supplements to support her clients' bodies' innate ability to move towards health. She is a certified practitioner and provider of TRE, and she's a heart math coach. She helps clients to reconnect with their body and nervous system, change patterns of held tension, and respond more appropriately to what is going on around them. As a behavior change coach, she helps clients to identify behavioral patterns that could be preventing them from moving forwards and gently shift towards more supportive ways of being. I actually did a session with Gemma a few months ago now because I'm always looking for different tools and therapies to recommend to my clients because everyone is so different. Some people absolutely love and get great results from breath work. Some people, it's more Reiki that they love. Some people, it's EMDR, tapping, hypnosis, and I just never tried or heard much about TRE before. So I reached out to her, had a little call, and then I booked in for a one-to-one session, which we did over Zoom. And I just find it so interesting. It is a tool that's used with individuals in the military or ex-military to help regulate their nervous systems, and they've obviously been through a lot. And it can even help relax any physical tension and physical pain they might be left with. So we did this over Zoom and just had to set up my laptop so that she could have like a full view of me on my yoga mat, and yeah, any movements that I would be doing. And we started with some gentle exercise to warm up. It was very low intensity. So if you're struggling with any mobility, all of these things can be adapted as well. So this is just what she did for me. And then the main exercise, you'll know if you've done this or if you do end up doing it, it's like a hip opening exercise. And the goal is to get to a 6-7 intensity out of 10 on the scale. But I just automatically imagine it as being like a workout. So I was in my Pilates headspace, thinking that the more that I hold it or the longer or the more that I squeeze my bum cheeks, the better results I'm going to get. And it was just like my body was naturally doing that, and she just had to keep pointing out, are you sure you're not like a 6 or 7? I'm like, yeah, maybe. And then I just thought I would get better results, but obviously not. So she was very grounding, and she guided me through very well. And even at the end, I was pretty restless. I feel like this is just a sign that I need to do things like this more often, because she left me in a meditation, relaxing state at the end. And it was like 10 minutes. But I thought, because we were over Zoom and I had the laptop on the other side of the room, I thought the connection had gone off or something because it was just silent. And I was getting in my head. I was like, what if the connection's gone? I've just been lying here for half an hour. I just had no sense of time at all. So I just shouted, I was like, Gemma, are you still there? And she's like, yeah. And I'm sure she could tell that my headspace was in a more stressed state that day. But I did really enjoy it, and I did experience the tremors that you're going to learn about today. And for me, it wasn't triggering or stressful at all compared to other intense breathwork sessions that I've done. I've just not felt good after them, and this I felt really calm and great. So in the episode, we're going to cover her journey to become a practitioner, working with these sensitive clients, what she's found beneficial for them, and the history of TRE, what it is, what happens in a session, what happens to our body when we experience trauma. both mentally, physically, some of the benefits that she's seen with clients and herself, just being a more regulated parent even. And we talk about the vagus nerve, we talk about the fascia, we talk about heart math, another thing that she's certified in, and just the importance of nervous system regulation overall, whether you are dealing with more hypersensitivity and immune system problems, or whether you're feeling pretty good and just want to feel better, or if you're dealing with any other type of health condition. We know now the importance of nervous system regulation, because if your body feels unsafe, consciously or unconsciously, if you have this tension in your body, if you have nervous system dysregulation, it's going to be very difficult to heal from whatever condition you're struggling with. So I'm so excited to share this episode. I will put all of Gemma's details in the show notes if you want to reach out to her, if you want to try a session online or in person. But yeah, let's get into the show. Hi, Gemma. Welcome to the Hormones in Harmony podcast. So happy to have you today.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me, Vivian. It's lovely to be here.
And I know we had a little session, so it's not the first time we've met. We've had a little call, and then I went through a TRE session with you, which I absolutely loved, and I just shared a little bit more about in the intro, but we didn't get a massive amount of time to chat for me to know about your history, really. So I would love to know, because with most practitioners, we're inspired, motivated, either from our own journey and struggles or someone that we know, or sometimes people, their parents were just very holistic and they've just been kind of brought into it from an early age. So I would love to know, your journey to become a practitioner and why you do what you do today.
Okay, of course. So I suppose, I've come around the houses a little bit. So I started off did science, cell biology and that kind of thing at uni, and then worked in a lab for a little while, realised that I much preferred the broad overview to the narrow focus. And so I ended up doing kind of science communication for a little bit, working with companies and things like that. So I didn't really get into becoming a holistic practitioner until after my daughters were born. So yes, basically what happened was I was thinking I would work freelance, but then my youngest daughter ended up with quite a few autoimmune conditions, and we weren't really getting the answers that I was hoping for from the medical profession. Basically those, when you're asking those why questions and they're just saying, oh yes, no, it just is. And I appreciate that, we've got a family history of that kind of thing, but equally it's like, well, are there things that we could do to stop collecting these diagnoses? That would be nice. So then I kind of got into functional medicine, looked into it and realised that the way to become a practitioner in the UK was really to train as a nutritional therapist. So I went and did my 3-year diploma, and then have ended up focusing really in that kind of histamine, immune sensitivity space. So a little bit about, with autoimmunity as well, but that just really came about, just was the people I got seemed to be those people. And I actually had some personal history with histamine issues following kind of gut issues myself years ago. And I think my side of the family and my father, for example, we're all a bit histamine-y, so we've got a tendency in that direction. So it's something that's got that familiarity.
And have you done any genetic testing? I don't know like how into that you are. I think
I have.
About 5 years ago it was pretty big and everyone was talking about MTHFR and nutrigenomics, and then I feel like it's quietened down a little bit. So, did you ever run your genetic panel on yourself or your kids?
Yeah, I haven't done it on my kids, but I have done it on myself. And yes, so for me, my kind of DAO enzyme in my gut, which breaks down histamine, is a little bit dodgy. I mean, it's not horrendous, but it's a little bit dodgy. But for me, I think there was a lot of gut inflammation, so it doesn't really matter what your genetics are, does it, at that situation?
Yeah, you could have perfect genetics, but you could still have imbalances if you've got toxic overload or nutrient deficiencies. You need nutrients to run these enzymes.
Yeah, but my methylation is not the best ultimately. So yeah, I think that's, and generally my detox pathways are sluggish. So you know, it's easy to tip me over the edge ultimately into having too many things that I need to detox, including histamine. So yeah.
And I talk a lot about histamine because that was a big factor for me. When I found the histamine piece a few years into my health journey, I was like, oh my God, I found the answer. All I need to do is go on a low histamine diet for the rest of my life. But that was not the answer. That was a very slippery slope. And it just ended up in extreme food elimination and restriction. And I then couldn't regain tolerance because I wasn't fixing the underlying causes. I just thought that the food elimination was the answer. So got down to less than 10 foods, found it really difficult then to expand, started running into more nutrient deficiencies and problems, and gut bacteria was becoming less diverse. So please try and avoid that if possible. And I am going to ask towards the end more of the physical things, because today's episode we're talking more about the tension and trauma release exercises, TRE, somatics, nervous system, because I don't know about you, but I believe that that is a huge, even more so than the food for a lot of people, the place that you want to be looking if you are under this like nervous system and histamine oversensitivity spectrum. But
no,
I feel like the nervous system thing is overlooked, and even in our studies, obviously we're studying nutritional therapy, so we're going to learn about the food as medicine, but I really wish more of this was emphasized.
No, I completely agree. I think it's such a big factor, and you know, we talk a lot, you know, we do talk a lot to our clients about the vagus nerve, but we're talking like, yeah, do some gargling and I don't know,
Basic
a cold shower.
Yeah.
And it's really not necessarily that simple, because what if you've got somebody who doesn't feel safe in, you know, that ventral vagal state that's so unfamiliar. So it's, yeah, there's kind of a bit more to it. I feel.
Even telling someone to meditate because of stress, that's a typical recommendation, isn't it? Most people like know to try that out, but for a lot of people it could be the wrong thing. It could actually be more triggering.
No, completely. If you're not happy with being with your breath, then yeah, that's, you know, it is really that matter. And we'll talk about that, I'm sure, about what feels right for you and what helps you get into that state and starting to connect with your own body, your own nervous system, to know what practices are beneficial and are not beneficial. So yeah, and like I'm sure you're aware from your history, you know, with that nervous system picture, there is, you know, it can be tricky for sensitive clients at the start, because every change is registered as a threat, and so you have to go really slow with all of this.
And even something that could ultimately be like really beneficial, something that they actually need based on a lab test result, the body, even if it's like the best thing in the world for them, is going to not respond well sometimes in the beginning. You have to just like ease it in very slowly, sometimes introduce one thing at a time in these micro doses. With the mindset work, there's just a lot of complexity about it. But what is it in these clients that you're working with, histamine sensitivity, probably struggling with the skin and digestive issues and hormone health, because we know how histamine affects literally everything, head to toe. When and why was it that you started to look deeper into the nervous system and somatics? Were you just realizing that you were only getting so far with some of these like health and supplement protocols?
I think the issue was that there are quite a few clients that were coming to me who were in that situation that you just described, who have taken out so many foods, who are still potentially being triggered by their environment and haven't been able to move out of a moldy place, for example, who, you know, but are desperate for something to help move them forward, and yet they can't tolerate the food at the minute, and they can't tolerate any supplements at the minute. So what can you do? You know? And so I was trying to look for things, you know, it was like, well, actually we can start to at least do certain things with the nervous system, so that you start to feel that sense of empowerment, that you are not completely at the mercy of all of this. And so, yeah, I had historically tried TRE. So I think it was just some kind of CPD training that I'd done where it had been mentioned in passing. And it turned out that there was a practitioner really close to where I used to live. And so I had about four or five sessions with her. And I really personally loved it. And so I'd always had in the back of my mind, I'd quite like to train to teach this. So yeah, when it kind of all came together, I was like, well, you know, hanging around waiting for the end of lockdown, trying to do an in-person training, and then I was like, oh, well, never mind, I'll just get trained then.
Is it mainly online? Is it only online that you're doing it now?
I do both, yeah. I do online and I do in person, like either one-to-one sessions or group classes near where I am. Yeah.
So was TRE one of the first somatic body-based therapies that you looked into and you just thought, this is great, I want to stick with this?
Yeah, it was. It was. I mean, I trained, well, heart math isn't really body-based, but it's on the nervous system side of things. So I trained to do heart math, to be a heart math practitioner before then. But yeah, the TRE was the somatic practice. And I just really, it really resonated with me. Actually, for that same reason that you just were mentioning about meditation not really being for everybody, I found that very hard. I've always been... I appreciate that my go-to is in that sympathetic state. It's in that, rushing around and doing and being busy and being in my head and thinking and all of it. So for me, sitting still to try and calm my nervous system was really anathema. When, I've been to nutritional therapists before in the past, and like you say, they do that whole, oh, you really need to kind of have a bath in the evening. And I'm like, I'm not having a bath in the evening. How ridiculous, sitting still in the bath. Don't be stupid. So yeah, for me, the TRE is brilliant because it is mindfulness, but you're actually still moving.
Yeah, so tell us, before we get into more of like what's it involved in, and also I do want to talk about heart math today, because that's something that I've known about for years now. I don't know if is it bigger in the US. I feel like a lot of American practitioners that I listen to, they talk about it, but is it
probably
more newly brought over to the UK?
I think it is probably bigger in the US, but I think a lot of people, I think we use a lot of the practice. Do you see what I mean? You don't have to really be trained in it. I just like...
Okay, yeah, I'd love to talk about that, but just a basic introduction into TRE. I'm just going to use that term instead of the full name every time, but we know we're talking about tension and trauma release exercises. So what is it? What is the history of it? What does a session like? Who can it benefit? You can just go off and tell us all that we need to know.
Okay, all right. So TRE was established by a chap called David Baselli. He is a social worker, PhD, and he worked a lot in war zones and realised that sort of after, if they were in the air raid shelters, for example, that kind of thing, a lot of the kids would tremble after bombardments and things, and the adults weren't. And he asked the questions and found out that a lot of the adults felt like they wanted to shake but were trying to hold it in so as to present this calm front to the kids, so don't be scared, it's all fine. But the kids were shaking. And then he looked in the animal kingdom and realized that actually after periods of stress or arousal, a lot of animals also shake. And it seems that this is actually a positive way of your body resetting itself. So it's almost like resetting the nervous system. So if you've gone into that sympathetic state, which is that sort of fight and flight response, or if things have been even more stressful and you felt overwhelmed and you've kind of frozen, then these tremors, these micro movements ultimately help to either mobilize your body out of freeze or discharge that kind of energy that you would have used for fight or flight, but you didn't. And so after, it's kind of then also sending so many signals from the body up to the brain to say, actually, you're safe now. And then you can kind of get on. So there's videos online of, an impala, for example, having been chased by a lion, gone into that freeze state, which, is a beneficial state for that impala to be in at that time. I think we've got to be careful not to demonize these other parts of the nervous system. They're all really important. It's just you don't want to be stuck in them. But so it's gone into the freeze state, which probably means its body's been flooded by endorphins. It's dissociated, which is great for two reasons in that situation. Either the lion will get bored and walk off, or if it doesn't, you're not going to feel, it's not going to feel any pain if, the end comes, for example. So, but then the lion does disappear. And then you see that impala shaking. And then you see that impala just getting up and walking off as if nothing ever happened. And you think, well, that's great. It's not carrying around this memory, this history of that incident. Well, we don't know, obviously, for sure. Maybe it will be more vigilant in that particular area, but it doesn't look like it's
worrying
around forever. And you think, okay, this would be kind of handy for us to have a tool that we could utilize so that we're not carrying all this past stuff around with us, because now we're in a safer situation.
And in TRE, we're actively bringing up that shaking sensation is it to strengthen our nervous system, or is it to like unlock and tap into a past memory where we needed to shake but we didn't? Are we releasing old traumas, or is it just to strengthen, or both?
Well, I think there's a little bit of both there. I think there's an element that you are helping to, if we think about that sort of, think of that, the nervous system or those stress responses as a kind of cycle whereby you've got that safe connected state where you're in ventral vagal, you've got that sympathetic state, and then you've got that freeze response, which we would say is governed by the dorsal vagus nerve. You want that to be working on a kind of cycle so that we can mobilize in and out of states as is appropriate. But like I say, we can kind of get stuck in one or the other, or, have a tendency to be in one, which is not necessarily that useful. So what this, the shaking is allowing us to bring a little bit more fluidity, I would say, back into our nervous system. And we might need to do that little by little because we're not used to being in certain states and it might feel uncomfortable, but ultimately it's helping to bring that back. And that can feel like that sort of window of tolerance is bigger. That kind of, what do we call it? That kind of stress container is bigger. So rather than us overflowing, with a tiny little bowl of, whatever stresses have come in, we've got a swimming pool now, so we're much more able to manage and flow with things before we get stuck. So yeah, there's that. And then also the tremor, so we call it tremors, but it's really any involuntary movements of the body, and I'll get into that. But these sort of neurogenic tremors, these micro movements, can also help mobilize the body itself, the fascia. So where we have in the past maybe been overwhelmed by a situation and not being able to express our emotion at that time because it was not appropriate, or we felt it wasn't appropriate, in order not to express emotion. So say if you're feeling rage, if you don't shout or wave your arms or what have you, you're actually bracing yourself against doing that in some ways. And so therefore we're holding that tension in our body. And if we don't kind of ever alter that pattern, maybe we're holding that for a long, long time. So the tremors can mobilize those areas where we're tense. And sometimes it can, it can bring up emotions related to past events, but it doesn't necessarily link them to those past events. I mean, yeah.
So it's not one of those therapies where you really go into like the roots event and have to go deep into the experience and the memories and the feelings. So I feel like that's what scares a lot of people off doing this work, is that they're like, yeah, I probably know what the origin is, but I really don't want to revisit that experience when I was 4 years old, or this thing that happened when I was 10. They would rather just suppress it because it feels too scary, too painful to even like think of bringing that back up.
Yes, exactly. So the beauty of TRE is that you are not having to do any talking about it. You're not having to cognitively revisit it. We're not dealing with the cognitive side of things, really. We're dealing with that physical, the physical after effects, ultimately, of those things. Now, saying that, those patterns have potentially been put in place because of these overwhelming events, and they were protective patterns. And so we do talk a lot in TRE about kind of self-regulation, doing things within your own comfort zone, so you are if you have been frozen or your musculature has been tight, would be the physical correlate of that, to bring fluidity back to that area, sometimes you have to go through kind of mobilization, and that might feel odd for the body, because it's not used to it, and therefore that might make you feel a bit anxious about it, but you do it within your comfort zone. So you could just touch into these movements for 30 seconds, say, and then pause and integrate. So the idea is to keep it so that you're not overwhelming yourself.
So there's levels and options for everyone.
There really is, yeah. And for some people, you might want to spend quite a while just figuring out ways to find safety in the body, and doing physical kind of grounding or other grounding techniques before you even go into the tremors, if people are particularly sensitive or things have happened. But again, for some people, you might think that you know what I mean? It's very difficult to know in advance. You might think, oh no, that person's been through a lot, maybe this is going to be problematic. And actually their body is just so ready to let it all go, and they feel fine.
This is a benefit of working with a practitioner. They can guide you through. They know like when you should be stopping. They give you a heads up what to expect. I
think that's it. It's to help you. Well, number one, when you're with a practitioner, you've got that benefit of co-regulation from another person, who's somebody whose nervous system is already settled. So that can in and of itself help your nervous system settle. There's the fact that for the first time you do it, and I'm sure you can say what your experience was, but it is different because your body ultimately is moving itself.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah.
And I could definitely tell like you were very well regulated and just a very grounding energy on the call. And yeah, I didn't like ask what you thought as a practitioner with me doing it, but I felt like I was treating it like an exercise, like a workout, like a Pilates session.
Yeah.
And even at the end, when we had just a little like grounding moment, I'm pretty sure it was only like 5-10 minutes, but I was like so restless and I just felt so uncomfortable just lying there on the floor. And I thought the Zoom call had disconnected or something. So I was like, Gemma, are you still there? She's like, yeah, I'm still here. Just relax. Turn your mind off.
Yeah. So yeah.
I needed your calm energy. Otherwise, I would have, if it was just me on my own, I would have lied there for 2 minutes and they'd be like, right, done. Let's on to the next.
Yeah, and that's
to lay and just be in silence, which is
what I
do.
Yeah, and that's so interesting, isn't it? Because I think for those of us who have a tendency to be in that sort of activated state and in our heads, it's so easy to think, oh, the process is, doing the exercises, doing the tremoring, that's the work. And yet actually the integration and the lying and the letting it all settle is as or more important than what's come before. And so there is that issue if you are doing it on your own to skip out.
Yep, I see that happening.
Just get up and unload the dishwasher or something.
That's definitely me. And am I right? So with this TRE, the main focus that was like shaking and that we were like, specifically working on was the hips. So you kind of did like a lie on your back and then you open up your hips, and then most of the tremoring, probably for most people, I'm sure it affects other body parts. But is that like the go-to place, and why is it that particular area of the body? Is that it stores a lot of emotion?
Yeah, so initially the exercises are there. The exercises are there, and they were set up so that it helps you access that tremor mechanism, which is ultimately, innate to all of us. There are. I think it's just the legs at first to activate often because they've been carrying us a lot, and also because of the exercises that we've done in order to help access the tremors. Now, what is quite important is that whole kind of psoas muscle around that kind of pelvic area, that front underneath your belly button, that sort of area there is where in traumatic situations that tends to contract to pull that front of your body forward to protect your organs. So there is a lot of focus really on that kind of psoas muscle as part of the exercises as well, to help release it, because that is where we do store quite a lot, like you say, of that held tension, of that held emotion, and we often don't stretch it out. I mean, and we do spend so much time sitting that actually we're already
A lot of people know that they have tight hips as well if they do any stretch pigeon pose, or if they go to yoga, they can often struggle with their hips. And I've noticed even in yoga classes, when I didn't even know about all of this, the energy connection, I was just doing yoga because that's all I could tolerate at the time. And anytime I do a hip opening pose, at the end of the session in Shavasana, I'd just be crying. I would have no idea, nothing happened, nothing was triggered. It was just this release because I was storing so much like emotion and tension in my hips. So that was like a eye-opening moment. And then when I've come to learn all of this, I'm like, yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that is where a lot of the tremoring starts, but it doesn't necessarily stay there. So that, you know, if you only go to 1 or 2 sessions, then likelihood is that you're going to feel those tremors in your legs and possibly your hips. If you continue, what happens is the body sort of serially unwinds. So it starts to unwind there, and it sort of seems to move, the tremors seem to move. Well, I mean, it will be different for everybody else. To be fair, I tremor a lot in my face. And I've always have done. And I think it's partly because I have a tongue tie. So I think I've a lot of held tension in my face because I'm using everything in a, what do you call it? You're just compensating for that. But yeah, so normally you see these tremors kind of move up. That is called the front line, the fascial front line. So that there's a line of fascia that runs all the way kind of from your toes all the way up the front of your body, all the way up through to your jaw underneath here. And so it seems to be that this kind of unwinds first, and you see people, the tremors move. And then later you might see people sort of be a little bit more rotational around the spine almost. It's sort of like, and there again, there's these lines of fascia, there's sort of these spiral lines, and it seems to move in that direction. So, you know, things shift. But some of that will be according to where you've held tension, you know, as well, either habitually or because of things that have occurred.
Okay. And how does this tie into the vagus nerve? So we touched on that before.
Yeah, of
like
course.
humming, gargling, we're told to do. How does this practice support the vagus nerve, and why is it important?
Well, I think if we're talking about kind of generally reducing, you know, supporting that nervous system, if you think that actually 80% of your signals from your vagus nerve are going to come from your body up to your brain. So it's very much a bottom up, you know, nerve really. And it's telling you, it's really giving your brain so much information about your environment. We, you know, call it neuroception. So what's going on? Are you safe? And, you know, so yes, there's information coming from all your senses, and there's information coming from your body, like where it is in space and how it's held. There's an awful lot of that information. So actually changing how your body is in space will change the signals going up to your brain, and all those signals are then kind of you know, integrated in the thalamus, and then they kind of check back in with your memories. Well, is this safe or not? And then you decide whether or not you're going to launch your, you know, a stress response. Checks in with kind of that emotional center, the amygdala as well. And are we going to launch a stress response? But if you have been chronically holding tension in your body, so say you're going about and you're clenching your teeth always, your jaw's really tight, which, you know, lots of us are, or you're holding it in your shoulders, which I know lots of us are, because you've been driving on the, you know, you've been driving on the motorway and gripping the steering wheel, and, you know, these sort of areas of tension, if you think when you would normally have grit your teeth, well, it's because you're angry with someone, you're frustrated, or, you know, so that physical sort of holding of tension is actually sending that message, yeah, you're pissed off with somebody, or, you know, that tension in your shoulders where you better get ready because you might need to whack somebody. It's really, you know, if we look at it cognitively, I was just driving on the M25, but that's not what our body doesn't pay any attention to that. It just knows that you were getting ready to
Obviously,
do
things like just day to day, your body language and your posture are obviously really important as well. So I see a chiropractor every month,
Mm-hmm.
and they talk about how like physical misalignments can affect the brain and vice versa, and the organs coming off from the nervous system. And then I've also heard people like Tony Robbins say that you need to shift your state, and how like physically sitting up taller and pulling your shoulders back and like projecting your chest forward, doing these power poses can change your like thought patterns and state very quickly.
Exactly. And so what's happening in your body is helping to signal that safety or that unsafety. And that's what's feeding into the stress response. So that's kind of what we're talking about in terms of the vagus nerve. I mean, you know, if you're watching this, you can do it for yourself. You can sit there, you can, you know, clench up your hands, clench up your face, clench up your shoulders and feel into how that feels. So notice your heart rate, your breathing rate, how that feels when you've got, you know, a tight tummy. And then change that and sit back in your chair and relax your shoulders and relax, you know, really feel your feet on the floor being grounded. Just give a gentle smile, you know, and you can see how that changes things. So you can sense, oh, actually, what's going on in my body is
But a lot of people try to change the thought first, don't they? They try to think happy thoughts or gratitude, or think of something that you're grateful for, happy for, and that's only 20% of it. If you address the body-based stuff first, then you'll find that the thoughts are a lot easier, or they're just automatic.
Yeah, and also there's that element of cognitive dissonance then between what's happening in your body and what you're telling yourself. And yet, you know, not saying it's not helpful, but we also know that people who've been through traumatic events, for example, that signal, you know, yes, there is that ability to change how you react to things with that top-down thinking, you know, with that frontal cortex, but we know that those signals become weaker when you've been through emotional events. You know, if something triggers you, like a smell or a location, or if it was your child, for example, and something triggers your child, you know full well that you logically explaining to them that there's nothing to it doesn't that's not going to wash.
I was at a retreat last month, so a few weeks ago, and I like one of the activities that she had us do was moving through different emotions, but we kind of like played them out. So she said, for the next 2 minutes, I want you to act out anger. So we were like hitting pillows and shouting, and at first everyone was like laughing and giggling, and then everyone really got into it. And then we had a break, and we just got back into a neutral state for 2 minutes. And then we went into the next emotion, which might have been joy or pleasure or excitement. And it really just showed me how much that, because for sadness, we were like hunched in a ball, and we were like kind of making ourselves cry and feel sad. You had this music on and everyone's body language was really sad. But then I really realized how easy it was to release all of the different types of emotion. So just as quickly as I could get back to a neutral state from anger, I could from happiness and joy. And that really made me feel like less afraid of my emotions, because we're told anger and sadness are bad, happiness and joy are good, but they all just come and go. And then one of the practices that we did as well was shaking, but it was a full body shake. She had this like really exciting music on, and we were shaking full body head to toe. And then when we stopped, my hands were just like balls of energy, and it was just tingling all over. I felt so good. And I also do things like exercise on a regular basis. So what would be the difference between just doing a full body shake once a day for 2 minutes and moving the body through exercise and helping release that fascia and getting the blood flowing versus TRE?
Right. So I think, you know, there are obviously benefits to that. Don't get me wrong, there's benefits to doing the exercise and getting the blood moving. But I think the difference with TRE is that you are allowing the body to move itself, and you're actually relinquishing control, and you're being really mindful during the process. You're also really mindful about what's going on in the body, but just allowing it. So rather than you as a cognitive being deciding what your body needs, your body is just telling you, actually, I need this, and you're letting that occur. So you're not forcing anything in, and in actual fact, the forcing is not helpful, really. So I think it helps with your connection with the body, first of all, and it helps with, especially for people who have maybe lost a bit of trust, I would say, with their own body, because maybe they've been ill for a long time and they're a bit annoyed with the fact they feel their body's against them and things like that. You can start to actually realize that your body is trying to do all of this for your own good. It's just maybe a little bit keener than you would want.
This activity, I see how someone who is in this very like hypersensitive and adrenaline overdrive state, if you're just shaking your whole body for 2 minutes, I was fine with it. I loved it because my nervous system's in a more regulated state now. But yeah, I definitely think for the more sensitive person, someone with more extreme nervous system dysregulation, TRE would be much more suitable.
Yeah, and even then, you know, we would probably do a very small amount and a lot more grounding.
So how many sessions would it take for someone to start to feel a shift? How long do the sessions last? So just a bit more about timings.
Yeah, so the sessions themselves, normally, kind of if I'm doing a one-to-one session or group session, the first session tends to be about an hour and a quarter. But it really varies. So for somebody were like chronically fatigued, obviously we could run through things a lot quicker and a lot would, you know, without quite so many exercises and so on, and have the same effect within about kind of 20 minutes. But yeah, normally about an hour and a quarter. So we would spend a little bit of the time at the beginning doing some grounding, and helping people to start to feel into their own body and their nervous system and how their nervous system state is. And then do some exercises just to bring warmth into the body. And here in TRE, we're really thinking about a scale of 0 to 10. And actually, this is where we differ in the exercise front as well, I'd say, because if you think about 0 being no kind of no activation at all, and 10 being like you've gone for the burn, that's what 80s spray, we're looking at really going for about a 6 or a 7, where you're feeling a bit of warmth in your muscles, but it's not too much. And really, that is what we're looking at the whole way through. So you're not really pushing yourself, you're not really trying to achieve anything. You're actually just trying to experience it and see how it is within your own kind of comfort zone, or maybe on the very edge of your comfort zone, you know, no more than that. So yeah, we do these exercises, which, you know, are pretty gentle exercises. And again, they can all be amended. So there's a chap in Denmark, for example, has worked a lot with patients with MS who have mobility restrictions, and they can all be adapted. And then I'd show you how to kind of connect with this innate tremoring mechanism, and then how to stop the tremors, and then I'll guide you through the process. And that part where I'm guiding you through the process is very much led by you, and actually the whole lot is really led by you. You know, obviously being a kind of trauma you know, involved with, I mean, you don't have to have had trauma for it any nervous system arousal, any stress and tension. It's a useful tool, I would say. But, you know, for those people who have had more severe things, and who have not necessarily, I don't know, have had to push through in the past and things like that, you know, it's very much like, don't just listen to me, and do really feel into what's right for you, and stop when you want to. And I was going to say as well, those, when I'm talking about kind of the tremors, as I say, they're called sort of self-induced therapeutic tremors, or neurogenic tremors, really, in the technical term. But really, it's any involuntary movement. So it could look like a sort of essential tremor, like, you know, very small shakes, or it could look like much bigger shakes, or it could look like kind of swaying or shifting, or it could just feel like one bit of you sort of over time get a little bit more like, oh, actually I think my arm needs to go over here and this needs to, and or it could be yawning, or it could be tummy gurgling, or any of these sort of internal movements as well.
Yeah, I just found it really fascinating. I didn't really know what to expect. I didn't know if it was going to feel triggering to have this shaking sensation, because if you think back to times that you have felt like that, it's been associated with fear or something bad happening. But I was just when my legs, and they were very obviously shaking, and I was like, oh, it's really, really cool. I was fascinated.
Yeah.
What is happening?
I know, and that's it. And a lot of people worry that it's like, oh well, this probably won't happen for me, even though most people are like, oh, I don't know if it's going to happen. I would say, yeah, at least 90%. Most people in that initial session will notice something, and yeah, and over time you would probably notice something, and even if they don't notice any movements, they will probably still notice something within the nervous system.
So with your practice and when you're using it with clients now, what type of improvements have you seen, results? Have you got any like case studies off the top of your head where someone's really seen improvements with it?
Yeah, so there was one lady actually who had, I mean, there's always, people always sort of surprise me. I would say the majority of people afterwards feel calm. For some people, I would say sometimes I would just warn you that you can feel activated. So if you decide to go off and do this on your own, following videos, just be aware that you can, because you're mobilizing yourself, if you've been in freeze before, you can end up feeling a little bit activated afterwards. So that's why the grounding and knowing how to ground and being aware of your nervous system is really important. But majority of people afterwards feel much calmer. I've had people who sort of have said, oh, they've, felt so much more relaxed, so much quicker than they have done in the past, even if they are somebody who regularly meditates or does yoga or other practices. It sort of seems to get a little bit deeper somehow into that ability to feel calm. I've had a lady who had an issue with her foot, and she felt it was an emotional issue, and she wasn't really being able to walk on it. She was having such trouble, and actually having done this seemed to sort of almost like reconnect her foot with her body ultimately, and just take away a lot of the pain. So personally, because I've been doing it for a long time, my own case study is a bit better. So I have been a migraine sufferer since having my kids. And when I first did TRE, part of the reason for doing it was because I thought it might help with the migraines. And I was seeing a cranial osteopath at the time. And when I went back for a repeat session, having then practiced TRE kind of in the intervening period, she was just like, well, what have you done? What have you been doing? Because she could really feel the difference with how that tension was. So like that was really nice to have an objective somebody objective
It's you like,
saying,
this is great, I feel calm, but someone
you
can
actually
physically
have
like see a shift.
physically change something. But yeah, over time I would say personally I've noticed my jaw changed, my head posture's changed, my I always had sort of wings at the back, with my shoulder blades sticking out, that they were a lot flatter. So there have definitely been physical alterations where I think I've been able to become more in alignment. And in terms of emotional regulation, I've found it super helpful as a parent and to so I've always had that kind of I'm very affected by other people's nervous systems, as it were. So if people are upset, I viscerally feel it. I mean, I can't watch The Office or whatever because it's so embarrassing, and then I viscerally feel it. So I've had that merge, I suppose, that not very good emotional boundaries And I have found it, I mean, I still can't really watch The Office, but I have found
Well,
it.
that's your example. I thought you was
No,
going
but
to say
you
some
know
sort of
what I
like
mean? It's that
really
whole thing.
emotional movie or horror film. You're like, no, The
Yeah,
Office.
exactly. But in terms of other people, I think it's been really helpful within the family, where if somebody is in a mood, you're much more able to separate yourself emotionally from that and be a buffer. So like we were saying, that kind of container is bigger and you're not getting triggers and adding to the situation. So I think it has these ripple effects with everybody else as well. And because you're more grounded, you can co-regulate without doing.
Oh, yeah, it's a big benefit. I'm sure lots of people will be like, sign me up just to be a calmer parent. Snappy, be able to like handle the tantrums and
Oh,
the
yeah. And
dysregulation that
actually,
comes with
I think because you're more in tune with the nervous system in itself, you're more, when you're saying handle the tantrums, well, I think that's interesting because actually those tantrums are just like you just said, you went to your retreat and you got your
it.
anger out and then it passed. So if you're able to
Just
allow that expression while you're calm and somehow contain it, but allow that, because ultimately where are all our problems stemming from? Because we haven't been tantruming.
good point. And then if you stay grounded and calm, that energy to the child is going to rub off like it does in the sessions. If you just remain grounded,
Yeah,
the
exactly.
tantrum will probably like pass quicker.
Pass quick, rather than you kind of trying to tell them not to do this, which is they viscerally need to do at that particular moment in time. Yeah.
Really good point. So in terms of a regulated nervous system, what would we expect to feel day to day? So what's like the ideal situation? What could someone expect to feel as they move through the day? What are we aiming for here?
Well, we know, ultimately, we know that there are, when we're talking about this sort of the polyvagal theory, where we've talked about that ventral vagus being that nice kind of connected and grounded, that sort of safe space. You've got the sympathetic activation, which is kind of that activation for doing things, and yes, it could be fight or flight, but it's also getting up and getting on.
Go and yeah.
You've got that kind of dorsal vagus, which is, yes, okay, overwhelm and freeze, but it's also involved in stopping and meditating and going to sleep, so there are physiological reasons for all of those. And actually, we also think, yes, in certain, you want to be able to respond to your environment appropriately. Ultimately, that's what we're aiming for, is responding appropriately to the environment. So if we can move in and out of those states as is appropriate, and if we can keep that kind of ventral vagus active at all times, that modifies what's going on with the other two nervous system states. So say if you have got, when we're saying sympathetic nervous system, people will be, stress and but actually, competitive sports, you also need it, but you've got that ventral vagus active as well, and that's why it's fun. And then, the same as I say with that dorsal vagus, if you're going to sleep or you're being intimate with a partner, you've got dorsal vagus, but you've also got the ventral vagus. So it changes that from panic and, rabbit in headlights. So I suppose from the point of view of how you feel, we want to be in that state whereby we've got a nice connection with the environment. We're able to flow with what we're doing. Ultimately, it'd be lovely if we're not getting stressed about things all the time, but we are living in.
Yeah, it's not the goal to be perfect and always be in that ventral vagal state, like to be able to like flow between but come back to that state of like calm and balance. The majority.
Exactly, because actually it's what you said before as well. We've been told, well, in certain circumstances, we've been told that you shouldn't be angry and you shouldn't be sad or what have you, and we should always be happy. Well, actually that's not very helpful, because those emotions are just telling us things about how we feel about the environment. We should definitely be angry if our boundaries have been violated, and that's telling us we need to do something about it. And we should be sad, we are likely to be sad if something, has occurred and we've lost a loved one. So, these things happen. It's just, can we feel sad, grounded sad, not being overwhelmed with sadness, but being able to handle those emotions is where we'd like to be. So we don't get buffeted about by them, but
Are
we
you
can
still using your heart math training? Like, how does this tie into everything?
So interestingly, from the heart math, if we're thinking about the physiological kind of signals of where you're at on the nervous system, that's sort of where, there are tools to monitor your heart rate variability, and heart math have done a lot of research kind of around that heart rate variability and what that looks like, and they're sort of looking at that a sort of coherent pattern. Ultimately, your heart rate does vary between the in-breath and the out-breath, even we're expecting that variability, but you want it to vary in a nice coherent rhythm. And actually that's how you can tell if that ventral vagus is activated, because you could be, in a sympathetic state and your heart rate is really fast, but you still see that heart rate variability in a nice sort of like sine wave, a nice wave. Whereas if your ventral vagus isn't activated, that heart rate variability is kind of all over the place. It looks really spiky ultimately. So that's sort of what they've used that as a tool, and they've come up with techniques to help you get into that nice coherent state.
Well, like breathing exercises, or is it gadgets?
Well, really, the tools that I've used, it's sort of breathing, but also with that felt state. So kind of visualization, but a little bit more like you were just saying on your retreat, you're actually trying to bring about, so breathing with your focus on your heart center and breathing in and out in a kind of steady rhythm, and then trying to bring in a sense of calm or safety or something you love or appreciation. So you might be considering being in a place that you love. Like I always think of near Beachy Head. I love it up there and standing and seeing, the cliffs, and or I might think back to a time when I was really young and my grandma, was close by. So a loved one, or, a real sense of safety. So bringing that kind of sense of safety and love and really viscerally feeling into that at the same time as this nice breathing in, this nice, easy rhythm. And then they also kind of expand that a little bit so you can think about giving that out to other people. But it's really trying to just help you get into that ventral vagus.
Was it the research that showed, is it like the electromagnetic field of your heart is like 4 times? I don't know. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. It's huge. It's really huge.
I'm like trying to go into the quote, but I can't remember all the details. I don't want to butcher it.
Yeah, no, I can't. I probably can't tell you either, right off the
It's
top of my
basically
head.
really powerful, and it does
It is really
expand
powerful.
like outside of your physical self.
Exactly. And so, when we were saying about neuroception and that feeling of safety and where are you getting information from? Yes, you're getting information from your own body, with your where your body is in space and things. But like I was saying before, I really pick up on other people's emotional states. And that's where we feel, the thinking is that's probably part of this massive electrical field that we're generating. And that is interacting with other people's electrical field. So you can sense through these kind of electromagnetism, basically, you can probably sense if somebody else is coherent or incoherent. So if somebody, is has got, I don't know, I always call it like that fog of anger around them. You can go into a room, can't you? And you can immediately sense if there's been an argument, and nobody has to tell you. And how can you sense that? Well, I think it's partly this.
So
I think, like we were saying before about, they don't teach us much about the nervous system. Well, it is so biochemically led still, I think, the functional medicine and the nutritional therapy practices. And there is not as much, consideration of this.
I hope that it changes though. I do feel like more practitioners are realizing that the protocols and the detoxes and the supplements only get you so far, so they're going down these different avenues to learn more about it. But it'd be great if yeah, some of the training started to incorporate this stuff, because it would save a whole lot of time for practitioners to
Everybody's
get
learned.
the results even faster.
Yeah, I think so. I think starting with some of this feeling, because if people are not feeling safe, it's really tricky. I mean, yes, there may well be external reasons why they're not feeling, and internal reasons, and biochemical reasons why their body's in this state of stress. But equally, there are things to other practices that could help without them.
That's the exact reason that we're talking about nervous system. So just to summarize it all, it's very difficult to heal your gut, your hormone imbalances, to recover and rebuild and detox, and have resilience to a lot of foods, and recover from things like food sensitivities if you're in a dysregulated state. Because if you're feeling like you're in danger, either consciously or unconsciously, your body will start to think that other things in your environment are unsafe, like the foods and the supplements, and then it can get to a really restricted place, and can be very difficult to get out. So going back to the nervous system and working on that usually expands the tolerance. And then these protocols and lab tests can be really useful. So it's not just one or the other. It's the nervous system is huge, and I'm talking about it today with you because a lot of people overlook it and they don't know the importance. But
Yeah.
I'm sure you agree, the food that you eat and the infections that you have in your body and the mineral deficiencies that you have still play a part. So with these dysregulated clients and these hypersensitive histamine, high histamine clients, what are some of the general things that you're doing on more of the physical level with the food and everything?
On the physical,
it's very different person to person, but yeah, are there any like general things that you can share?
Well, I mean, I think I am like you in that if we can maximize the diet as much as possible, that's really important. So not restricting if you don't need to restrict, and trying to work on, I mean, again, it is around that safety, but trying to work on that feeling that some of those foods are okay, because the restriction is so detrimental. I mean, it's really hard because people feel like they are, well, people are reacting to everything, they are reacting to everything. But some people are reacting more to everything than other people. And the people who aren't really reacting to everything, please don't take things out just because you've read about it. If you're not reacting to it, please don't get rid of it. I think that's the key, isn't it? Because you can get in a right pickle.
Yeah, there is a time and a place for little, I see them as like challenges or trials and experiments now, instead of like this food is bad, this is good. Or even with histamine rich food lists online, you might be actually reacting to one of them, but absolutely fine with another one that's on the high list. So listen to your body rather than the food lists from the internet, because if you were to put all of them together, all of these different ones, it's got every single food out there on there. So you're going to be stuck. So listening to your body, and even if you do, because for me, a lower histamine diet really did make a difference, and it just allowed the inflammation in my body to really reduce, because I was thinking I was doing the right things by eating a ton of high histamine foods, trying to heal my gut, the fermented foods at every meal, bone broth every day. I was meal prepping, so I'd eat leftover foods like 5 days in a row. And I was just like histamine overload. So for me, reducing that, and with histamine, it's not like you have to avoid all of the foods, it's just that balance again. So if you're eating one high histamine food, can the rest of your plate be slightly lower? And that might make a big difference. But if you introduce a high histamine food and you're still reacting, that's a sign that you haven't actually figured out what's going on. It could be genetic predisposition with that low DAO enzyme. But if you find that you're just reacting to more and more foods, or your reaction is quite severe, then the nervous system is the work there is both our top recommendation.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So I think, yeah, definitely you're right. You do need to listen, and don't just blindly keep doing things if you know you're reacting because you don't want to take it out. But equally, please don't just go.
Working with a practitioner as well is just going to speed up your results instead of trying to do everything on your own. That will take the stress off your nervous system, just knowing someone is in your corner supporting you.
Yeah, exactly. Finding somebody that will listen to you as well. And because being gaslit is very much of a danger signal. So trying to find somebody
That's like a big part of my trauma, is like the medical trauma from years of being told it's all in my head, or I need to take these medications, or nothing's wrong with you. That was like a huge thing that I've had to work through.
Yeah.
I thought I'd worked through it, but this recent retreat told me otherwise.
Okay.
And before I let you go, Gemma, I just want to ask you a few more questions. They can be a bit more quick fire, these ones, just for the listeners to get to know you a little bit deeper. So what is one thing that you do daily to stay in hormonal harmony? I'm sure you do things like TRE on a regular basis, but is there anything else that you'd love to share?
I'm a bit rubbish at consistency, to be honest. I do pretty much go for a walk in the morning every day. I do things like, I'd say go for a walk every morning. I'll do that.
Amazing, love that. Number two is there a book recommendation that covers any of these subjects? So it could be histamine, it could be nervous system, TRE.
Yeah, so I think Deb Dana, I'm not sure how you say her name, but she has written quite a lot about the polyvagal theory, and she's quite easy access, as it were. There's a book called Anchored, which is really nice, which is a bit more of a workbook, and it helps you to start to connect with what those different nervous system states feel like in your body. So that might be a good place to start.
Love that. Is there a piece of takeaway advice, a summary to this episode, some wise words of wisdom that you want to leave everyone with?
Okay, so I think I would just say, as practitioners, I think Vivian and I will probably both say that we've had a lot of clients come to us saying that they're not stressed. And as a practitioner, you can see that that person is stressed. So what I'd like you to think about is, when we're talking about that sympathetic nervous system, it is activation. So if you are doing a lot, and if you are thinking at speed, and if you are talking at speed, and if you are multitasking, and if you are looking after a lot of people, and if you are driving on the motorway, because there's so much visual stimulation, I would say that you are probably spending a lot of time in sympathetic activation, which is equivalent to stress. So you might not cognitively feel stressed, but
even if you love all of those things.
Yeah. So just be mindful that that is activation. So taking a little bit of time, if you feel yourself talking at speed, then maybe just take a little bit of time after that, after you come off the phone or speaking with your friend, to just feel your feet on the ground, maybe just gently sway from foot to foot and try and ground yourself. And I think you will start to notice that difference, and then you will start to become more aware of when you're on.
I need that advice, because even when I'm listening to seminars, online, podcasts, it's always in double speed. And I know it's so bad, but I think I'm just getting double the amount of information in half the time. But I know that it's just overwhelming my nervous system, and my boyfriend will overhear it and he's like, how do you even know what they're saying? It just sounds like babble.
Yeah, you just normalize that, and that's where you feel safe in sympathetic, and that's the thing. It feels a little bit unsafe to be calm, and actually your body does need that in order to regenerate. So
when it's in 1x speed, it sounds like they're talking in slow motion. But I really need to like train myself back to real life conversation
like
speed.
on sweet foods, isn't it? You just have to wean yourself back onto thinking parsnips and stuff.
I'll do 1.5 for a bit.
Yeah.
See how that goes. And if anyone else can relate to that, and maybe you've listened to this whole episode in 2x speed, change it now. Change it to the next one being 1 time, and let's do this together.
Excellent.
And very last question, Gemma, is where can people find you? And tell us a little bit more about the sessions that you're offering with TRE if someone's interested.
Okay, so my website is intunenutrition.co.uk. And then if you do /tension trauma release, then it will come up with all the info about TRE. I do online sessions, and one-to-one sessions. I do some online group sessions. It's probably worth you trying a one-to-one session first, just so you know how you are with it. But then after that, you can join group sessions. And after that, you can practice at home. That's the beauty of it. I think I haven't really said that. It is a self-help technique, so you don't have to be working with people. And then I'm also based in Oxford, so I do group sessions and one-to-one sessions kind of in Epsom and Oxford. So you're more than welcome to join me if you're local.
Amazing. I'll put all of that in the episode show notes if people want to click through to your website. And yeah, I just want to thank you for being here today, sharing this amazing tool, this really powerful form of somatic therapy. And I just see myself as a little guinea pig who just tries all of these different things. And yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by the results I got with TRE. So that's why I wanted to have you on the show. So thank you for going a little bit more into the science today. And I'm sure if people listen, they want to try it out, they'll love it as well. So thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, I'd say as well, if you want to find a local practitioner to do it in person, if you're not keen on the screen, then it's traumaprevention.com is the TRE governing body kind of thing, and you can go on there and find a provider. So there are quite a number of trained providers in the UK, because I appreciate that, you know, sometimes people's nervous systems are activated just from being online. So it's nicer to be in the room with somebody.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Gemma.
It's all right.
I really hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, I would love for you to leave me a rating and review on your podcast app, as this helps to support the show and it allows it to reach more people with this valuable information. Come and say hi over on Instagram. I'm at Viva Natural Health. And if you haven't already, check out my website, vivanaturalhealth.co.uk, for tons more free resources and to discover how I could support you further. I currently offer one-on-one consultation packages if you want my top-level support, then more affordable group programs and self-paced online courses. So there really is something for everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you back here next week for another episode.